Hey guys, it's Matt and welcome back to Mix Series. So we are going to be diving into playback tracks. Now we have already gotten our band mostly mixed, gotten a rough mix on all of them, and it's time to get playback tracks done. So this is an area where I think a lot of people are still really new to mixing them. The way that they're used, it varies, depending on what band you're working with. Everybody has different philosophies when it comes to working with playback tracks. But these right here are going to be pretty generic. So there's not like a bunch of crazy like vocal chops or weird vocal stuff in there. It's just like strings on the band channel, synth on the synth channel, and so on. So let me explain kind of how I usually break down my playback tracks as far as what's coming from the stage. There's no right or wrong way to do this. I think the only wrong way is to use mono. Just my opinion. I don't think that having one channel is enough. If you're going to just have one channel for tracks, you probably are better off not using them, to be honest. I think that it takes a lot to get playback tracks to feel like they are part of the band and not like just something that you're playing behind the band. It takes a lot to get it there. I try to keep them as separated as I can, but obviously there is limitations there. On an X32, we're only working with 32 channels. So we don't want to use every single channel on the board for playback. And a lot of big tours, you'll have 32, maybe even more playback channels, and that's more than the X32 can handle without even talking about the band. So I usually like to break it down into two different ways. The first way is a synth channel, so a stereo synth, stereo band, stereo perk, and stereo bass, and then my click and cue. So total, that's going to be, I think 9 channels. 9 channels, it would be 10 if you used click and cue on a separate channel, which you totally can. There's nothing saying you can't. And usually that's actually how I set it up. On the X32, that's the way I set it up. In other scenarios where maybe you have like a fuller band, you might separate it by like synth, and then guitars have their own. So if you have to fill out your band at all with any sort of playback guitars, you can have a dedicated channel for that. I think that's really valuable. You can have a dedicated vocal one, which is huge, because if you want to blend some of the tracked vocals into your mix, you can do that, and you have more control over it. Doesn't really matter how you set it up. I'm just gonna say that. I think having control over perk and your bass stuff and vocal stuff and all that is great. But a lot of this can actually be done on Ableton. So if all you have is, say, like 2 channels or 4 channels of tracks, and then not counting your click and cue, because I know a lot of people are using like 6-channel playback interfaces, then obviously you're limited. So you need to take the time and go through your tracks on Ableton and actually make the mix the best you can there first. So if there's something that's sticking out to you on Ableton, just pull the tracks down. I mean, like, you can do it that way, or you can wait till it hits the board and then you can't do anything about it because it's blended in with other tracks. So I say do as much as you can, do as much work as you can before it ever hits the board, and you'll be good. Obviously, you're going to have to do what you got to do as far as what instruments you're leaving in the tracks. I try to go as scaled back as possible. I would rather have my live band filling in as much space as possible, even if it means it's going to sound just a little bit emptier than the album. I'm not trying to make an album. I want it to sound good in the room. And sometimes these tracks get really dense, and it can be difficult to make them fit with your band if they're super dense and really produced. And yeah, so let's blend them in. Let's see where we're at. I'm going to kind of pull everything in together, all the band that we've already mixed, and kind of see. I've got all the processing turned off on my tracks. I'll go ahead and kill all my compression, because I think I had a little bit of compression on them. And then we'll blend them in and see where we're at. Don't want to touch them too much. Don't want to do too much to them, but we're probably going to have to do a little bit of work. So let's see where we're at. So on this song, it's not too bad. It's not too messy. Sometimes you'll get a lot of buildup in like the low mids that will tend to happen. I think we were pretty intentional about what tracks were left in. But let's hear the playback tracks by themselves and kind of see what they sound like just on their own, sitting with this rough kind of fader pull up to the rest of the mix thing that I've got going on. So let's pull the bass out, the synth bass, take perk out, the band channel. So this is just synth. So I think they sound pretty good. I'm gonna take a little bit of the like higher mids, that stuff in the tracks. I feel like in a live setting, it's going to crowd my vocal a little bit more than I'd want it to. So I'm just going to kind of tuck that down just a little bit. And maybe tame a little bit more in the low mids. I don't think we're going to touch it too much though. So let's go ahead and just pull those back. Might add a little bit of high. Okay, cool. So now the only thing that I want to do with compression really here is I want to add a compressor just to tame if there's any like standout things that are happening in the tracks that maybe I won't be able to catch. That's all I really want to do. There's a lot of compression on these tracks already because they're already produced and mastered and everything. So I really don't want to add more unnecessary compression because then that's when the tracks start to really kind of sound fake in my opinion and everything starts to sound like karaoke. You want them to sound as unprocessed as possible as if they were being played on the stage in my opinion. But we're just gonna add a little bit of light compression just to tame like the very tippy top. All right, I think those tracks are pretty good. Let's pull up the band channel. So this is going to have like horns and strings, and then anything on the stage that would be like replacement like instruments. Like if we had an electric or something like that, it'd be coming through these channels. All right, let's listen to Park. All right, so subtle stuff there. I just feel like that like chime thing, that like weird hit, is it's had like a weird resonance going on. I don't know if these tracks were warped or if they were tuned up or down or anything. Sometimes that'll happen too. If you tune your tracks up or down, you'll get like weird resonance stuff going on, and sometimes you'll want to EQ that out. But again, it's weird because if you're working with like a normal set list where you're like combining tracks from a bunch of different bands, like this one would be Hillsong, like that, there's gonna be some weird differences between each one. They're mastered totally different, mixed totally different. So we're making some like generic adjustments, especially because it's an X32. I'm not really doing snapshots or anything. We just kind of, it is what it is. So let's work with bass, track bass. So this is a synth bass, and it's just going to add some thickness to our overall bass sound. Not a lot of low end in that sound. There it is. So I'm noticing all the tracks in this song, the way that they're mixed and mastered, I feel like they're going to crowd the vocal a little bit. So I'm taking some of that like 2 to 3K out of all of these tracks. Let's blend everything in. I feel pretty good about that. I would in this scenario, this is one of those where I would probably go to Ableton and actually turn down that like weird effects loop that's in there. It's coming through the synth channel instead of the perk channel. Usually I send like effects loops to the perk channel. So clearly that was just something they probably missed when they were setting up Ableton. But yeah, so that's kind of how I would blend the tracks in for this song, at least on an X32. So yeah. In the next video, we're going to be looking at the vocals here and then really kind of getting this mix all finished, wrapped up. So see you in the next video, guys.